So you saw the title of this video, the team that doesn't shoot mid-range jumpers. I'd bet the first thing that probably comes to mind is James Harden, Daryl Morey, and the Houston Rockets. With Harden in control of the offense, Morey ball was in full effect from 2013 to 2020. In Harden's first year in Houston, the Rockets took the second fewest long twos in the NBA. But after that, they finished number 1 in the category for 7 years in a row, with their lowest mark coming in the 2018-19 season, taking just 1.5 long twos per game. So yes, Houston was the NBA team most allergic to the mid-range jumper. But there's a college team that happens to be one of the best in the country this season, playing an even more extreme style of basketball than the Rockets did. That team is Alabama, led by Nate Oats. In Oats' 4 seasons so far in Tuscaloosa, the Crimson Tide are averaging just 0.6 long twos per game. No other power conference team has averaged under 1 per game during that time. Of course, it is important to remember that college games are 8 minutes shorter than the NBA. But even if we account for that, the James Harden Rockets averaged 1 long two-pointer every 12 minutes of action. Alabama has averaged 1 long two-pointer every 65 minutes of action. Nate Oats, who is actually a former high school math teacher, is taking the analytics movement to the extreme.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about efficiency numbers with us. So you just figure out what the most efficient shots are and try to generate those type of shots. So, you know, if you're shooting 40% from 2, which is typical mid-range shot, that's 0.8 points per possession. That's not very good. You're going to lose most of your game.
Watch Brandon Miller on this play. With his defender in the process of falling down, he's pretty wide open for a mid-range jumper. But instead of taking the 2, he backs all the way up to get the extra point. Here, Vanderbilt switches a big onto Mark Sears, but now instead of attacking the switch around the elbow area, again Sears backs all the way up beyond the 3-point line, ultimately finding Miller for a skip past 3. This is a graph of every power conference team from the last 4 seasons, including this year. The horizontal axis is how fast each team played on offense. The vertical axis is how many threes each team shot as a percentage of their total field goal attempts. It's not a surprise that the team all the way to the left is Virginia in 2020. Their average possession length was 20.8 seconds, the slowest on the graph. All the points in the top right quadrant represent teams that played fast and shot a lot of threes. If we zoom in on that quadrant, all 4 data points in the top right represent Nate Oats' 4 Alabama teams. They're playing a brand of basketball unlike any other power conference team. Of course, any team that plays as fast as Alabama relies on getting out in transition for easy buckets. The Crimson Tide averaged 16.8 points per game in transition. That's good, but not necessarily as good as you might think. 16.8 ranks Alabama 41st in the country, so well above average, but not quite elite. Where Bama really separates themselves is by playing with pace and space in the half court. You don't see a lot of false motion or purposeless ball movement early in the possession. Instead, they get right into their ball screen actions. Here you can see one of their favorites. Noah Clowney sets the side ball screen with the ball side corner completely empty. All 3 Alabama players not involved in the ball screen are located behind the 3-point line on the weak side. Alabama will flow right into that empty ball screen early in possessions, looking to hit the roller to the hoop or find a 3-pointer out on the perimeter. This is a diagram of Alabama's court terms. I didn't make this diagram. It's actually from a presentation the Alabama coaching staff gave themselves back in 2020. The most interesting term is what they call the Houston spot, which I assume is named after the Houston Rockets. The Houston spot is even labeled on their practice court. You can see they have what they call the 4-point line, with the Houston spot located beyond that line.
4-point line's kind of self-explanatory. It's more of a spacing line. We don't want our guys, you know, you kind of have steppers and huggers. We don't want our guys hugging the 3-point line. We want them stepping into the 3-point line on the catch. So if they're behind the 4-point line, they step into the 3-point line.
Look at the spacing as Noah Gurley sets a ball screen here. Two players are deep in their respective corners, and Javon Quinterly is way behind the three-point line in the Houston spot. When Gurley slips to the basket, he has all kinds of space to work with. Quinterly and Brandon Miller aren't afraid to shoot from that Houston spot several feet beyond the three-point line. Those deep shots then force defensive players to move further out beyond the three-point line, in turn opening up the paint for more driving opportunities. That's the added benefit of shooting a lot of threes. Because Alabama sets so many spread ball screens, they face just about every defensive coverage you can imagine already this season. Here, Mississippi State is icing, so Bediako flips the screen and Bradley keeps the defender on his hip. Missouri aggressively trapped the ball screen, so Bediako and Clowney were open on the short roll. Houston played their normal 2-on-the-ball defense, and Alabama responded with 3 skip-pass threes in the first half against the Cougars. It's rare that Houston gets exploited from behind the three-point line like they did against Alabama. And Gonzaga switched the Bama ball screens. Here you can see Bradley attack Drew Timme after the switch. When Alabama finds a mismatch that they like, they'll immediately get to their spacing spots and hunt that mismatch within isolation. Here you have Sears and Clowney in the corners, Bediako in the dunker spot, and Miller in the Houston spot. Notice how much space the Mississippi State defense must cover to close out to the Houston spot. Same exact thing here against LSU. Bradley gets the mismatch, Pringle fills the dunker spot, and Quinterly nails the 3 out of the Houston spot. On this ISO mismatch, Bama goes 5 out, leaving the dunker spot vacant. Now they have 3 players on the weak side, with Dom Welch way out beyond that theoretical 4-point line. That's Nate Oats basketball for you in a nutshell. I mentioned earlier that the Crimson Tide don't run a ton of sets. They usually just flow into ball screens. But one action they do like to use is a wedge or ram screen. This is the first play of the game against Houston. Bediako sets the wedge screen on Miller, who then sprints into a ball screen for Sears. Some confusion by Houston leads to a 3. Later in the second half, Clowney set a wedge for Miller. This time with Miller popping into the empty corner and drawing the foul. Nate Oats has several different ways to incorporate that wedge concept into his offensive scheme. Horns Clear is another quick-hitting set Alabama has had success with. The play starts out in horns with 2 players in the corners and 2 players at the elbows. When Bradley dribbles at Miller, Miller clears out to the opposite wing, opening up a driving lane for Bradley. They got a dunk off of the play against Houston and a layup off of it against UConn. Nate Oats' 3-point philosophy doesn't just end on the offensive side of the ball. Alabama is also very good at taking away 3-point attempts on the defensive end. This season, 47% of Crimson Tide shot attempts have been threes, while just 31% of their opponent's shots have been threes. That 16% differential is the highest among any power conference team in the country. In total, just 7 power conference teams have a 10% differential. With all of their length and athleticism, Alabama's defensive efficiency has actually ranked higher than their offensive efficiency this season. By taking away the 3-point line, they make their opponents shoot the shots that Nate Oats is trying to avoid on the offensive end. One of the main reasons they're able to take away the 3 is by using deep drop coverage when defending ball screens. Instead of getting up towards the level of the screen, the Alabama big man guarding the ball screener drops back into the paint and dares the ball handler to take a mid-range jumper or floater. In fact, opponents are averaging 7.5 floater attempts per game against Alabama's defense. That's the most floaters allowed by any of the 363 defenses in Division I basketball. And opponents are shooting just 40.6% from the field on those floater attempts, just over 0.8 points per shot. The Crimson Tide also have the versatility to occasionally switch screens instead of using their drop coverage. For example, they were in a tie game with Arkansas at the half. Oats adjusted at the start of the second half by switching everything, trusting Clowney and Gurley to defend the Razorback guards in ISO situations. Those switches, combined with Alabama's length, disrupted Arkansas. Bama went on to win the game by 15. The game of basketball has certainly changed in recent years. The common narrative used to be that three-point shooting teams that played like Alabama couldn't win championships. But in the past decade, we've seen Villanova jump shoot their way to 2 national titles, and of course at that same time Steph and Clay were taking the NBA by storm. So now the question is, can all of Nate Oats' pace and space propel Alabama to a Final Four or even a national championship this season? Well, with March just a month away, we'll find out soon enough. This video is again sponsored by Hudl. I want to show you the behind the scenes of how I used Hudl Sports Code to watch and organize the film in this video. This is called a timeline. It contains all of my clips of Alabama's offense. You can see I have a row for each of the topics I talked about in the video. Spread ball screens, empty ball screens, even the Houston spot has its own row of clips. I can then click on any one of these rows and watch all of the clips consecutively. Here you can see the first empty ball screen clip. Another feature of Hudl Sports Code is called the sorter. Here I'll send all of my wedge clips to the sorter. You can see I have typed up notes for every clip. I can then use the sorter to sort the video. So for example, I'll put all the wedge Spain clips together. This is not only how I organize my film, but it's also how Division I coaching staffs all around the country organize theirs. If you're a coach or analyst looking to enhance your video workflow, you can learn more about Hudl's entire suite of products at hudl.com/hoopvision. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.